to Elmhurst, our community. I'm Ken Bartels, your host, and we're coming to you from the Community Bank of Elmhurst and its business zone. And today we have the opportunity to talk to the still new mayor of Elmhurst, Scott Levin. And Mr. Mayor, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure to be here, Ken.
I want to start out with a question about public service. I mean, you were board chair of the Elmhurst Chamber, obviously on the board as well, an alderman for 11 years in the 5th Ward, an interim mayor for a few months, and now elected mayor. What drives Scott Levin's public service, commitment to public service?
Well, you know, I always wanted to be involved, and this is the local level of government. You're actually dealing with the people who you're going to come across, who you serve, and it's a way to kind of know what's going on around town. You forgot to mention I ran in 2009 and didn't win, but so it's been something that I've been involved in for many years.
I think touching on the comment you just made, local government service. You're the mayor and you're at the city council meetings and you're presiding and discussing and making decisions, and then you run into your constituencies at the supermarket or on the street or in a restaurant. What do you hear most from citizens of Elmhurst when they encounter you?
Well, sometimes, even as recently as this week, someone came up to me at the train station, "Are you the mayor?" And I'm proud to say and happy to say it's not just a reflection on me, but on the entire city council, that people are largely happy with how the city's being run. They're pleased to know that the services are not only of high quality, but we're staying within the budget. Occasionally you get a complaint about speeding on the streets, or they have a particular issue, but largely people are pretty happy with how things are going in town.
So, as a way of providing some background for the audience, how long have you been a resident of Elmhurst?
We moved here just a little over 24 years ago, and my daughter was just about a year old.
Okay, and your time as an alderman, about a decade's worth. What do you remember about that, or do you remember the impetus for deciding to run for alderman?
Well, actually, I didn't really run because I had run against Pete DeCiani, who became mayor, and when Chris Schneibel, who was the 5th Ward alderman, was elected to the State House of Representatives, Pete DeCiani appointed me to fill the unexpired term that was vacated by Chris Schneibel. So even though we ran against each other, we were friends. He asked me to co-chair his finance task force right after the election, and then he appointed me.
Do you remember any specific issues during your time as alderman that are particularly memorable?
Well, you know, as alderman as opposed to mayor, you really you're that first level for the constituent calls, and starting in 2010, right about that time when Pete came in, is when we really started having water problems, and there were many times I remember walking the streets with the water coming up, almost to your knees, and going into someone's basement and seeing their new basement was ruined, and it was important to see that this water problem was real. That's probably the most impactful thing you could see as an alderman. Well,
I think the work that the city's done over the last decade plus in mitigation of the stormwater issue that the community faced has been nothing short of amazing.
It has, and we've spent about $42 million. We hired the best engineer, I would say, in the state. We had a plan, and we got a plan before we started. And I would say, just from my discussions with other managers and mayors in DuPage County, we are a leader in being out front to solve that problem. And others look to us for, how did you do it? What kinds of things did you do? And I don't mean me, but I mean the city, certainly, of course.
Yeah. So you mentioned running for mayor once and not winning, but you also were an interim mayor. I know it was several months, I don't remember exactly how many, but what was that like?
Well, you know, there was about 6 months, and that was when Pete DeCiani went to the
Right.
county board. It was, you know, very interesting, a lot of fun. But I will tell you, my feeling then was I was not elected by the people, I was elected by my peers. And I felt that I was the steward for keeping us going until a new mayor was elected. So I kind of felt like you set your eye on the North Star and keep the ship going that way. But being elected, you have to have some longer term plans, and so it's a little different animal, and I'm going to be here 4 years, so you get more time to get things done.
So the last campaign, 3 experienced candidates by any measure, all aldermen with long track records. What made the difference, do you think, in your election?
Well, and it's true. The other 2 candidates had been aldermen for at least 20 years, so they were long term. I think maybe a couple things. One is I kind of ran sort of in the middle of the road in terms of the politics and the approach. The national election tended to bleed, or national politics tended to bleed down a little bit even into our nonpartisan local elections. And I think probably the other factor is that although they've been on the council, I think I've been more involved in different kinds of activities in the community, whether it's representing or being on the board of a hockey club or Indian princesses, whatever you say now, Indian venture guides, whatever, and being on the PTA. And so I've been involved, you know, Chamber of Commerce, so I've been involved in a lot of things. So I had, I think, constituents or people who would support me all around town.
We talked a little bit about this before the taping began. What's the inherent challenge in balancing being mayor and being a practicing attorney? The perception in town is the mayor should be everywhere and do everything. Somewhat unrealistic considering it's technically a part-time job.
That's correct. Well, I don't think anyone fully understands how many hours it takes, and as an attorney I keep track of my time, what I spend for each client, and since I've been mayor I keep track of that too. And I think I've got it backwards because I spend about, for the last 3 weeks, I know I've spent about 35 hours a week being mayor and 15 practicing law. I have to obviously swing back so it's a little bit more balanced, but if someone wants you to come and, you know, deliver a proclamation, if someone wants you to attend a meeting because they have a concern, you have to be there. But I do think a lot of people don't appreciate that if you don't get back to them right away, or if you can't make a meeting, it's not because of the lack of wanting to be there.
Well, and it's complicated because Monday nights are gone.
Yes.
Either in council meetings or committee meetings. And then what we're kind of talking about are the ceremonial duties. And they're just sort of piled on top of the governing.
Well, there are ceremonial duties. I'm on the two-page managers and mayors legislative committee. I'm on the intergovernmental county board. I'm one of the selected mayors on the intergovernmental committee. I attend meetings of, that maybe with a developer who wants to do something in town, a liquor license candidate. So the mayor has a lot of other duties that aren't just city council. And then every alderman and the mayor, you don't just walk in. The work is done in committees. And so there's could be some good sized reading assignments. If there's a zoning case, it could take you many hours just to get through that.
I can't imagine. So we're going to talk about some of your priorities and hopes for the next few months or even longer than that in the second part of the program. But are there some immediate issues that you're dealing with right now that are sort of higher than others?
Well, I think the resurgence of the pandemic is front and center. When Mayor Morley went back to his private life, he was saying, boy, you know, I went through this whole year and you have it easy. And then I talked to him recently, and now we're looking at dealing with it again, and we don't know to what extent. It's certainly not as bad now. And just, again, you have, we are dealing with a masking issue, and you have a certain group of people say, well, don't impose on my freedom, and you have others saying we have to do this, and we have to make a decision. And the main thing is we don't want another shutdown. We want to keep things open. We want to protect our residents. So that is probably going to be a big issue, and it ties over directly. We have Rock the Block coming up.
Right.
A couple
In
weeks.
September. Yeah,
Are we going to do
early
that?
September.
We have the Turkey Trot. We have the St. Patrick's Day Parade. So we have a number of big events that we'll have to make decisions on.
Well, and I think too, with the pandemic, the masking is one thing, but in my view at least, we seem to be incrementally moving towards some kind of a vaccination mandate, if not official, unofficial, with the decisions by both private corporations as well as government entities to say, look, if you want to work here, you're going to get vaccinated unless there are medical circumstances or other quote unquote legitimate reasons for not. That's going to be an issue that's festering along as well.
Yeah, and I don't think, I mean, I think in the last day or two, Indiana University's mandatory vaccination program went up to the Supreme Court, and the justice who heard it said, we're not taking this case, meaning that that decision stands, that it stays
Right.
in place. We are fortunate. I think that the percentage of vaccinated residents is higher than most places. I don't think it'll ever be something that the city council will decide on,
Right.
but we'll see it decided.
Right. I want to shift gears just a little bit. The city council has a number of new aldermen on it. It's probably total years, probably one of the younger groups of aldermen in terms of overall service in quite some time. What, as an experienced alderman and now as mayor, what can you do, or what kind of advice do you give new aldermen?
Well, it's funny, it's an interesting question, because if you consider an alderman new, even though they came on maybe last October or whatever, about half of them are new.
Right.
And on Monday, Jim Nudera will be appointed, assuming the council follows my nomination, he will be appointed as the new 5th Ward alderman, so that will make it about 50%. Fortunately, we have a very large council, 14, which is larger than just about anyone in the state other than Chicago, and so there are other experienced aldermen who can help guide them. I always make it a priority to take a call from an alderman if they want to talk about an issue, because it's very hard. If I wanted to call around and speak to all of them with 14, it would take me all day, and it's just, can't be done.
Right. So as a still new mayor, but as an experienced Elmhurst leader, how much of a benefit to you is it to have an experienced city manager in Jim Grabowski?
Well, it's very important. I mean, the mayor doesn't run the city. I kind of regard my role as chairman of the board, and the council's the board. And we got a CEO who's finishing 10 years, just had his anniversary, I believe, last month. So when you come on and you have a well-run operation, that makes things a whole lot easier. And Jim Grabowski is one of the most, if not the most, respected city manager in DuPage County. So I'm glad to have him.
And I think the city is very glad to have him too. At that point, we're going to take a break. We'll come back. We're talking with Mayor Scott Levin, City of Elmhurst. The Community Bank of Elmhurst Business Zone has modern co-working space and a conference room free for our business customers. Visit the zone today at communityelmhurst.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender. Welcome back to Elmhurst, our community. I'm Ken Bartels. I'm talking to Mayor Scott Levin of the city of Elmhurst. And Mayor, as you start out, I know several months in, but still starting out, can you share some priorities or changes or things that are up on your to-do list?
Well, fortunately, as I mentioned, things are going pretty well. There are a few issues that some might be kind of small. Like one of the biggest complaints I hear is speeding on the side streets. And remarkably, the people who are speeding are probably our own residents. So I would like to have an innovative program to address that. I think I'd like to go into a renewed planning session. We used to do this retreat where the aldermen would get together and be a visionary role to see where do we want to go, and that has been done in about 5 years. I would like to improve communications. I think our website really is in serious need of an upgrade, and there's some maybe controversial, maybe not, things we'll look at. Like we said, no to video gaming. Community was pretty loud and clear on that, but the cannabis issue is out there again, and I think we should look at what other communities are doing and see if that makes sense. I'm not hearing the same objection, and some people actually seem to be in favor of it. So, there's a number. I have about 18 projects I like to work on, but the city staff is already kind of busy, so we'll see how it goes.
You touched on the pandemic, and I want to come back to that for just a second. The city, the chamber, other organizations, but those two in particular were very, very active. The chamber and the city, it seemed to me, worked very well in tandem to get a lot of information out, and it was information in broad categories. Things you can do, things you can't do. Here's help if you need it. Here's loans and grants and everything else. The question embedded in that is, how do you feel that the business community fared during the pandemic in a general sense?
Well, in particular, I think obviously they're the businesses in the business and industrial park, and they probably operated just the way others would. They got their PPP money. We paid particular attention to our downtown and other business district businesses, the retail, because a lot of them, if they would have had a hard shutdown, wouldn't have made it. And I think, although we see some vacancies, by and large, we came up pretty well. I think, and I give credit to Mayor Morley, this was something where we kind of let him make the decisions with the city manager. We didn't have a hard shutdown. Most of the businesses followed the social distancing requirements of the day. And so by and large, we came up pretty well. And I will say, just about every night through the pandemic, I would walk from my house near Arlington and St. Charles, go up around North Avenue in York and come back, and I would see the outdoor dining experience. I think some of the restaurants might have done better over the summer than they would have in a non-pandemic. So there was great support from the community.
I think the rebound, with the assistance, with a lot of incredible work, but I think the economic development recovery of Elmhurst has been pretty remarkable to this point.
It has.
We'll see how it plays out. But
city staff, Erin Jason, our business coordinator, remarkably talented.
Yes, she's been on the program, and we've heard from her. Downtown residences, apartment buildings, what have you. I do hear from fellow citizens, gee, can we handle all these new apartments? And my response is, well, they're filling up about as fast as we build them. What's driving that?
Well, it's the concept is called TransitOriented Development, and I think once people hear about it, they understand it, and it makes sense to them more than if they don't. This is a group of people who they're single, they're newly married, maybe little kids, maybe empty nesters. They move in. Tremendous tax base increase, 85% of those tax dollars are going to the schools, but there are no children going to the schools who live there. I was surprised. I see some residents I know who downsize and they go into a 2-bedroom apartment. They're happy to rent. And because the people who live there are not driving much, they're walking to the restaurants, they're taking the train downtown, hence the transit-oriented development. And the key thing for Elmhurst that is even more important than other communities, when our Elmhurst Hospital moved from the north end, very close to downtown, to the far south end, the businesses saw the impact immediately because those were people and guests who came to eat and shop. And these new residential developments supply a base of customers to the downtown, which keeps our downtown thriving.
The mix of businesses in the downtown, in that, yes, there's a strong retail component, and then you've got the restaurants and the bars and service industries. That's a reasonably unique combination for West suburban communities. But Elmhurst is unique in another way, in that we've got a legitimate city center, we've got a downtown.
Exactly.
But then Spring Road, York and Vallette, and even Butterfield, not to mention Elmhurst Crossings, any of those places could be a downtown in some cities, particularly Spring Road.
I would say Spring Road probably comes close to being a mini downtown. The businesses there seem to do very well. You can walk down Spring Road on a Saturday, any evening. There's a whole lot of activity going on. They all have their own issues. Spring Road, hate to even venture into this one, parking.
Right.
I hear that when I go to their board meetings. I think some of them, like Vallette and York, probably need a little sprucing up. That's been a potential TIF site for redevelopment. And Butterfield and York has been talked about as a potential TIF site too. But all of the landlords in those developments are getting good tenants by and large.
Well, TIFs have been very successful in Elmhurst, the ones that have already lapsed and the several that still remain. And I'm not asking you to name potential new TIFs, but do you see TIFs in our future?
I think, TIFs got a bad rap primarily because of what, in the city of Chicago, they had so many TIFs, and it seemed like the money was being used as sort of I won't say a slush fund, but a pool to do many different things that maybe weren't as beneficial. I think we've been true to the intent of the TIF. They've worked out well. I can see there's the potential for them in the future. We're always going to be careful about them, and we use them for what they're supposed to be used for, which is to improve an area. And if you look at any of the ones we've done, they were very successful. They've been very successful. Now there's still a couple going. But,
right.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the time demands of being a practicing attorney and having family obligations and being mayor. And what does Mayor Levin do for fun?
Well, the mayor thing is kind of a hobby itself. I mean, I do it because I enjoy it. I still ride motorcycles, ridden with some of your compatriots here at the bank, the president of the bank, who's a new rider. I started playing hockey when I was 55. I still play. I'll never be good because you got to learn earlier. One of the things I also learned as being mayor is I was invited to a golf outing, and they said it was the Blue Jay backers, and they said, well, the mayor always golfs. I said, well, I don't golf, but I did take 3 lessons, and now I golf. I realize that people have a couple beers before we start. They can't see what I'm doing anyway. But
I heard you did just fine.
But so I've got those things going on, and I like to patronize our restaurants around Elmhurst and other places. So I keep busy.
Well, last question is, I I always try and give this opportunity to elected officials when they come on the program, is to look at that center camera and say anything you'd like to say to your citizenry.
Well, I would say this. It's your city council. You may not think always that we're listening, but we've got a very dedicated city council who pays a lot of attention to what goes on in town. And our goal is to not only deliver the quality government, but to let you know we have a caring, honest government that any community should be proud of. And if you have any concerns, either I or any of our other elected officials would be happy to hear from you.
Well, once again, Mayor Levin, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it very much. So this has been Elmhurst, our community. We've been talking with Mayor Scott Levin of the city of Elmhurst. I'm Ken Bartels, and we'll see you again. The Community Bank of Elmhurst Business Zone has modern co-working space and a conference room free for our business customers. Visit the zone today at communityelmhurst.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.